And suddenly the narrative changed. And the voices changed to English accents. Not French accents, English accents. And they said, we're not who we've told you we are. We're not that at all. Everything that we have told you was a lie. We have very different intentions.
So it's around this time as well that these strange paranormal events seem to start to escalate. Things went from incidents that could have been seen as you or Lily acting up or playing around to full-on disturbing events, which included physical contact towards you from something unknown, to a series of experiences that you can only really describe as some sort of actual spiritual possession.
Yeah. Things started to get very strange. Beyond the realms, really, of being able to explain them rationally. There were more and more spirits coming to us. They had different characters. Narrative was always a romantic one. It was some sort of romantic story about a great wrong being done in the past, and all of these characters were coming back from the dead to tell us this story, and it got better and better. But then it was just the sort of stuff teenage girls want to hear. You know what I mean? But then things took a real sinister turn. I remember lying in bed by myself at night at my parents' house, and something just whacked me on the back of the head. And my head hurt all the next day. It really, really hurt. And it was almost like it flicked with its fingers into the back of my head. Really, really painful. And there was like every night when I went to sleep, I would look into the corner of my room and see a dark shadow standing there. And I put my head under the covers and tried to ignore it. I'd look out again and it was still there. I would wake at exactly the same time every night, 1:20 a.m. One morning I woke up and found that my chair had been moved where I put my clothes, and my clothes chucked on the floor, and a few other things had been rearranged and moved around as well. And my brain felt different. It felt like it was constantly pushing against something. I'd feel frightened, like there was some kind of intrusive thought or some kind of thing coming through. I don't know how to explain it to you. So I would push against that thing and I'd imagine a brick wall, so that whatever it was couldn't get through. And I'd move that wall. I'd do a kind of mental exercise that involved moving the brick wall backwards to make more room in my mind for pleasant thoughts and myself, really. But I guess things really came to a head at the end of the summer at Lily's house. We were channeling the spirits as usual, and they were speaking through me. And suddenly the narrative changed. And the voices changed to English accents. Not French accents, English accents. And they said, we're not who we've told you we are. We're not that at all. Everything that we have told you was a lie. We have very different intentions.
Now, that must have been... I mean, I've actually kind of got goose flesh at the moment. So that must have been terrifying, especially for yourself and Lily, who have had these experiences and these spirits coming through and giving you an idea of who they said they were. but now their intentions have changed and the narrative has changed. That must have been incredibly shocking.
Yeah. Before they could get on to describe these intentions, I wanted to stop. And I couldn't understand what was happening. I began to panic and began to cry. Then I started screaming. And luckily, Lily's parents went in. Lily got a hold of me because I was starting to thrash about. She got on top of me to try and calm me down and hold me down before I did damage to myself. I was somewhere else.
Help me! Help me! Help me! Help me! Rachel! Rachel! Rachel!
Yeah, I was screaming and thrashing about, and Lily got on top of me to try and calm me down, but I was somewhere else. I was kind of like under attack, and I don't really know how to explain this. So imagine your own mind as like a favourite room, as a favourite room in the place where you live now. And in that room is the familiar furniture of your usual thoughts and your ways of thinking and your own inner voice and the patterns of usual mind traffic. Imagine now that somebody comes into that room, suddenly bursts in and starts tearing up that furniture and throwing it around, and you're pushed into a corner. Quickly, the room, your mind is transformed, and the thing that has come in is filling it. You're being evicted completely. I could not find a single familiar thought in my head. I couldn't find me.
Rachel! Rachel!
I couldn't hear my inner voice. Instead, there was something else, something which had intent. Its intent was to overwhelm my will entirely, and it wanted to throw my friend Lily across the room. I knew that it was going to use my body to do this, and I could feel its incredible strength. It felt like it filled me with incredible strength. I couldn't read any intentions beyond that, no future plans or anything except for that instant plan. But it was enough for me. There I was pushed into that corner, and my brain suddenly pushed back, like it had those nights and evenings when I was on my own and scared of some intrusive thought. And it was like I'd been practicing for this. Like something in me knew that this was going to happen. And this time my brain pushed really hard against something that was actually there. I stopped screaming and thrashing. I came back into my own head. And I asked Lily, very calmly, "May I have a glass of water?" And she went and got one for me. Neither of us talked about it. Our relationship ended then and there. I only saw her a few times after that. And I never messed with Ouija boards or the occult again.
So what you've just described is, well, it's simply incredible. A type of mental and physical possession by something which had quite possibly been brought through the board and into our very real and physical world. So you and Lily now separate and you completely stop using the board, but things don't stop there, do they, Rachel? And in a somewhat desperate decision, you turn to your friend Beth for help, but you also go back to church.
I took refuge in the church because after I stopped using that board and after I stopped channeling those spirits, I don't know what it was, but after I stopped doing what I was doing, I was plagued with the most horrendous nightmares, even worse than the ones I used to have when I was a kid. I don't know. I think my mind's blocked out what they actually were, but I got nightmares every night. And there was this one night when I'd gone to sleep and I was having one of these nightmares, and boom, the narrative of the nightmare suddenly changed and I felt it again slithering into my head. And I woke up and there it was, just as the same as it had been in Lily's room. It was trying to come back in, but this time I reacted much quicker and I pushed it again really hard out And I was scared to sleep after that. But I was also really angry.
Okay.
I was furious. How dare it attack me while I'm asleep? That's not fair. I'm vulnerable when I'm asleep.
Yeah, there's no way for you to defend yourself against it.
And I got the feeling that it wasn't going to leave me alone. And at that time, my faith was sufficient to believe that God could save me. And so I went back, I took refuge in the church, and I arranged to get a baptism. After the baptism, the attack stopped, but I was still a mess. I had severe obsessive compulsive disorder for a number of years. It controlled the clothes that I wore, my jewellery. I couldn't wear silver jewellery. You know, I thought silver was bad. I don't know why. It changed what makeup I wore on a certain day. I was frightened of Mondays and Thursdays. I don't know why. I always thought bad things would happen on those days of the week, especially Thursdays. I believed that bad things would happen to me. And of course, bad things did happen to me because that's life. I had a sudden bereavement when I was in my teens, and various other things. Of course, all my friends left the small town to go to university, and I was left behind. I felt like I was cursed with bad things happening to me. And I was very confused with what was real and not real. I had got with a boyfriend by then, and I told him a load of stuff that wasn't true because I thought it was, and it messed with our relationship and left all of these trust issues. It was a complete and utter mess, and it didn't really get resolved, really, until I was 21 and I left my hometown and went to live somewhere else.
So you moved to Scotland?
Not at that time, but I did eventually move to Scotland, yes, which I guess, yeah.
You go to Scotland a few years later and you have an encounter in a bar with a couple of women who were actually using a board. But you also had an experience with a well-known magician. And this seemed to bring back some very familiar memories and feelings. I'm just wondering whether you go a little deeper into those things.
I will, because if these things hadn't happened, I could have possibly written off what happened when I was a kid. I could have possibly written that off and said that it was a blip in my life, I guess, an aberration or something, you know, a blip. But I moved to Scotland. I used to drink in a biker's bar. And there are a few people in there who were going through a phase of doing Ouija boards. And I told them all about my experience, actually. They were one of the few people I've told. I'd never really talked about it. But these people I did tell. And they told me exactly what I was doing wrong. Did you make a circle of protection? Did you say prayers before and after? No. And it was like, I felt like such an idiot. And they said, that's why what happened to you happened. You left yourself open. So, yeah, that was very revealing to me. But of course, it made me blame myself more. Around that time, a friend of mine was dating a magician. And he had his own TV show late at night. I'm not going to say his name because I think he's a big shot in America now. But he does quite magic tricks that were a bit left of centre, but on the sort of like black magic-y, I guess. He would sort of like, he'd be in a supermarket, he'd be filming himself and his partner in a supermarket, and they'd make razor blades appear in ready meals and stuff like that. And I thought, oh my God, that's quite sinister what you're doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, my mate started dating him, so I met him, and he came to dinner at my place, thoroughly nice guy. But he said, I'll do some magic then, because we hadn't asked him to, because we were all too polite, because it was his day job. So anyway, he agreed to do some magic tricks. He put a coin on my right hand and he said, I'm going to make this coin dance up your arm. And I sort of like was waiting for this coin to dance up my arm. And all of a sudden I had that sense in my head that I was pushing against something, just like in the 1990, when the thing happened to me, it pushed really hard. And the magician looked at me and looked me right in the eyes. And he said, "I'm going to try your other hand. You're blocking my powers." I go, am I? And he grabbed the coin very quickly, put it on my other hand, and I stopped pushing with my brain. I lifted. It felt like I lifted up a gate, and off this coin danced up my arm. Off it went. And he goes, "There you go." And the coin just danced up my arm and fell on the floor. And I was like, wow. I've got no idea how he did that. But it's like, it kind of like was strange because I blocked him somehow, or at least that's what he told me. And that seemed strange to me. And it seemed like connected somehow. I don't know.
We now get to a period in the mid-noughties, and you've decided to move down to the south coast. You're still with your first husband, but things begin to get very tough for you. You begin studying for a psychology degree, as well as still working full-time, and this begins to become just too much. You have a breakdown.
Yeah, that's right. It was a pretty much normal breakdown as they go. I really hated my job. I'd got into a rut. I think I was a bit bored, to be honest with you, with life in general, and probably wasn't in the right relationship, although I didn't admit it at the time. But most of all, I didn't feel confident. I had a crisis of confidence in myself and I got depressed. Luckily, the place where I was working for got me therapy and sent me to a clinical psychologist. And the clinical psychologist was like, "Oh, tell me about your childhood and things like that." In one of our sort of like middle sessions, "Tell me a bit more about your childhood." And I thought, maybe this is somebody I could tell the Ouija board story to, because they might find it quite interesting and they might have an explanation somehow for it. I told her, and she said, other people that I've spoken to who have messed about with Ouija boards, they describe exactly the same thing. I was like, what? And she said, "I have no explanation for it." And then that was the end of the session, and off I went. And I thought, oh, next session, I'm going to ask her a bit more about this. But then a few things happened at work, and a few things happened with schedules, and I couldn't see her again for a long time after. And by that, there were other more pressing things to talk about. And so I never got to ask her. But it was like, whoa, you know?
Yeah, you've got somebody in a professional capacity kind of recognising that other people have raised the same concerns. That must have been really strange to hear.
It was, yeah, it was. And kind of like odd. And around about that time, I had another odd experience. I went to a museum of, I was on holiday somewhere and went to a museum of witchcraft. And in that museum were a lot of Aleister Crowley things, the occultist.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of his sort of things that he used to own and stuff. And I'm looking at these things in that particular room with his things, and I get the most blinding headache, a really, really bad headache, and a nauseous feeling with it. I felt very, very sick. And I thought I was genuinely ill and that I was coming down with something. But the minute I walked out of that museum, it lifted, just like a fog cleared from my brain, and I felt absolutely fine again. And that struck me as strange as well. It's like being around the sort of reminders of the occult and stuff like that, and the actual things that were used, that he used in his ceremonies and his, if you can call it that, and his raising of the dead things, rituals that he did, that invoked some sort of reaction in me. Even though I wasn't expecting it. I was on holiday. I was having a good time on holiday, you know. I didn't expect to feel like that. So, yeah, it's strange.
But even though you'd managed to pull through all of these difficult moments throughout your life, things still didn't get much easier for you. Your marriage to your first husband has finally broken down, but there was also another area of your life which was about to completely change, and that's your relationship with the church.
Yeah, so this was just the relationship with the church, the incident that sort of provoked that. I can pin it down to a particular incident. It had been growing for some time, I think, but I was still with my husband then. We were in the sort of latter days of our relationship. And I'd gone to a church on the South Coast. Now, he was an agnostic. He didn't believe in anything, but the church had asked me if I would make up the numbers in the band and do some singing, because there were some missionaries from America visiting, and they wanted to, have people in a band to do the sort of like Christian songs that they wanted to sing. And so I said, yes, I would do that. And I said to my husband, do you want to come and watch me sing? And he goes, oh, all right then. And so anyway, we go into the church and I'm on the stage with the other people. I didn't really know any of them. I was introduced to them and we hadn't practiced or anything, but I knew the songs anyway, because you do when you're raised in the church. And so it wasn't a problem. But talking to this one girl, having a very everyday conversation with her. Then all of a sudden, the band started playing. She stopped talking in an instant and her eyes changed. They sort of became very, very intense and very, very big. The pupils dilated and everything. And I looked around me and everybody in that church seemed to have the same very strange, intense expression on their face. And the American missionary started the service and odd things started to happen. I was raised in a very traditional church. This church, with these American missionaries, not so traditional. People started making prophecies. They said, I've been chosen by God to speak right now. And they'd come up and they'd say something that was literally, they'd profess to know something. They'd profess to predict something. And this is going to happen. And this is how God will act through me to save this particular situation, that sort of thing. Then the service went on and people started talking in tongues. I remember seeing one woman lying on the floor, in the middle of the floor in the aisle, thrashing about, talking in tongues, and her little toddler saying, Mummy, why are you thrashing around like that? Why are you lying on the ground? Mummy, will you get up, Mummy? She just didn't even acknowledge her own child. And this felt very strange to me and kind of familiar too, given what had happened to me. I'm like, are they sure they're channeling the Holy Spirit here? How do they know? This don't feel right to me. I could see my husband looking like an absolute rabbit in headlights in there. He's like, Jesus, what's going on? What the heck? And, the service eventually came to an end and it was all about the crucifixion, and it was all about getting through to people through their emotions. There was very little intellectual content in there, nothing to stimulate the mind. It was all about reaching people's emotions and making them feel guilty about Jesus's horrendous death on the cross. It wasn't particularly positive. It felt manipulative. So I left for church. The vicar was very apologetic to me because he could see the expression on my face. He said, will you come back tomorrow? I said I would do this, so I will. I said to my husband, don't you come back in there. I don't want you in there. He said, I don't want to be in there. He said, but will you be all right on your own? Yeah, I'll be all right. So I go back the next night and same thing happens again. And this time they have like a prayer tunnel at the end of the service, and we all form a queue to go through the prayer tunnel. We all have to do it. And so I am going to go through the prayer tunnel. I don't particularly want to. And I can see people getting to the prayer tunnel, which is basically a bunch of people standing either side of the aisle with their hands arced over each other to make a bridge that people would walk under, a tunnel made of people, if you like. And so as soon as somebody would reach that tunnel, they'd fall on the floor, they'd start talking in tongues, or they'd have some kind of experience, and then they would be blessed and go through the tunnel. The American missionary would bless them, and out they'd go out the other side and become completely normal again. I'm thinking, this is interesting. And they're damn well not having me behave like that. I can hear the guys behind me and they're saying like, oh, I bet I fall over straight away. I bet, so, you know, I'm not going to be able to walk through that. I'm not going to be able to. And they're talking about it like it's normal, like it's some kind of challenge to be able to walk through it, or, you know, that it's all too overwhelming for them and they're going to fall. And they're joking about it like it's kind of funny. It was weird. Anyway, I got to the tunnel and I put my head high and my chin out and I walked through it without any incident. My mind was furiously focusing on a brick wall. And I got to the missionary at the end who was going to bless me. And I looked him straight in the eyes and I gave him a hard stare because I didn't approve of what he was doing. I'm not judgmental or anything like that, but I didn't think that they were channeling the Holy Spirit in there. And so he said, more fire for this one, more fire. But no fire came. And I went and I got my things and because it was the end of the service and I left that church and I never went back into another one, except for hatches, matches and dispatches. And it did change my relationship with the church. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't think that you're taught to believe in the church. And I've always been sketchy on this belief that God is a man and we are built in his image. If that is the case, why would the Holy Spirit, which is part of God, take away people's dignity like that, have them lying on the floor jabbering, have them making prophecies that aren't going to come true, that having these narcissistic moments in the spotlight where they can say, I'm chosen, I'm wonderful. No. And I don't necessarily believe that we were made in God's image anyway. I don't put human intentions onto a divine being because you can't. Yeah, if God loves you, not going to do that. Not going to make you helpless and idiotic like that. No. And I do apologise if I've offended anybody.
A few more years pass, Rachel, and you find yourself now in a new relationship with a man you have a child with. You're in South Wales, but again, things aren't going great, leading to you and your partner deciding to live apart. And it's also around this time that you have a new series of strange experiences. But you felt that these could have been triggered by something that you'd started researching. Even though it's a very delicate subject, are you prepared to go into what you were researching and why you felt that the material you were looking into could have had a very negative impact on you in that particular moment in time?
I will go into some of it. I had a difficult relationship with the father of my child. He had moved out to live somewhere else and I was alone in the house with my child. And I couldn't sleep at night. I was going through a phase of insomnia at the time and I got hooked on a particular line of inquiry on the internet. It was related to what happened to me when I was a teenager. I suddenly started thinking about it again. I hadn't thought about it for years, but all of a sudden I started thinking about it again and I thought, I think my first question was, has this happened to other people and stuff like that? And I started researching and then as I was finding out more, I started researching other things, other questions came to me. And I was quite a way down, a few days down this line of inquiry on the internet, reading some pretty scary things. In the middle of the night, one night, I was eventually falling asleep and I heard somebody laugh directly in my ear. And I jerked into complete wakefulness and I looked around the room. There's nobody in the room. And so I checked the house quickly because when you've got a child, you do that. If a mouse turns over a pebble in the garden, you make sure it's not somebody trying to get in. So I did that. I checked the house, nobody there. Checked my child, he's asleep, he's fine. And so I go back to bed And I woke up in early hours and noticed I had about 1 million notifications on my phone, lots of notifications. And so I thought, what's going on? But I was tired, so I went back to sleep, woke up in the morning, and every single one of my social media accounts had been hacked. Every single one. I had a real pain in the bum sorting it all out. I had to change all of my passwords. My Spotify account I couldn't get back into again. I lost all of my music. Spotify had to close it and I had to open another one. It was a real hassle for me, and I love music. I was heartbroken about my Spotify because I don't have no CDs anymore. They take up too much space. I'm purely digital, so I lost everything. I remember that laugh in my ear in the night, and I knew that I shouldn't do it, but I put the two things together and I thought, I'm not going to research that stuff anymore. There's something that's telling me not to. And I don't know if it was my own intuition, my mind telling me don't go down that road again, or whether it was something else. So I never looked into that again. I stopped looking into it.
So we now find ourselves here in your home, talking about all of these incredible incidents which you and many others will try to put into some sort of framework. But the question is, what do you actually think happened here? And what explanation, or explanations for that matter, do you have for what you went through?
This is what I keep coming back to. I've got a master's in psychology. I've been to lectures where they explain all of these sort of things, pareidolia, hypnagogic, I can't pronounce it, but hallucinations to do with sleep, things like that. They're not enough for me. They don't explain all of it. If I was to swing the pendulum away from the skeptical explanation and go to a believer's explanation, is it some kind of demonic entity? Then I would be going back to that sort of churchy explanation whereby you're putting human intentions onto supernatural beings. So I'm going to be very frustrating here, Stephen, say, I don't know. And I don't know if I even want to know, if you know what I mean. If it's something scary, I don't want to know. If there's a lovely rational explanation that could wrap it up nicely for me, then yes, please. But I don't know. I've done a lot of studying of the mind and psychology, and I've reflected on this a great deal, but yeah, I can't explain it.
Rachel, if you have any advice for anybody who is even thinking of using a Ouija boards, with everything that you've gone through and everything that you've experienced, what would you tell them now?
Sure, go right ahead. If you've listened to this whole thing and you still want to mess about with Ouija boards, then I can't say anything to stop you. The Just Say No campaign against drugs in the 1980s wasn't particularly useful, was it? Because it didn't tell you about drugs. It didn't educate you about them. So what I would say to somebody who wanted to mess about with a Ouija board, I would say don't do it, please. But if you absolutely must, then please don't do it in your own house. Yeah, and also make sure that you have a group of people with you and a skeptic with you. Why would you want to? But anyway, perhaps a safe place to do it would be on one of those ghost hunts in a supposedly haunted house. But whatever you talk to and whatever you communicate with, that's not a spirit haunting that house. It's not going to be that. It's either going to be something from your own imagination or your own mind or somebody else's if you're doing it in a group, or it's going to be something worse than that. It's a bit like internet dating. When you go onto the internet and you meet somebody online who says that they really, really love you after you've only been talking to them for an hour or so, and they really care about you, and the relationship develops, and there's always a reason why they can't meet you in person. And then all of a sudden, when they're on their way to meet you in person, they've been waylaid at an airport, and they need loads of money to get out of some kind of situation. It's a con. Whatever is on there, it's not real. It's a kind of con, I think. I don't think I've explained myself very well, but I don't believe that you'll be talking to who you think you'll be talking to if you are indeed talking to something.
We're not who you think we are.
Before we bring this to a close, just 2 more questions.
Sure.
The first is, why now? Why have you decided to tell your story now? So many years after this has happened. Why now?
Because my parents are dead, and because I am sufficiently distanced from it not to be frightened anymore. I guess. My parents were lovely people, and I wouldn't want them to accidentally, I know that I'm totally anonymous, but I wouldn't want them to accidentally get wind of this in case it does come out and think that they didn't protect me when I was a kid, because they did. But kids get into things, don't they? And because I'm at distance from it now, and also there's been a kind of resurgence since a pandemic about paranormally stuff, and it's being talked about again, and I've kind of like started thinking about it more, and perhaps also over the process of thinking about my experiences to do this interview, I've become a bit more accepting of what's happened to me as well, and yeah, I want to get it out there and talk about it, perhaps as a cautionary tale as well, although people are going to do what they're going to do. Yeah, that's why now, because the past is a long way back.
Last question. Why choose this show? Why choose the Haunted UK podcast to tell this story to?
Because it's a very open-minded show. There's just your team and me. There's nobody bought into throw a commentary on my experiences or anything like that. It feels non-judgmental. It feels like a safe place to talk. And also the production and everything on the show is so very professional. I know that I'm not going to sound like I'm talking too much or anything. You do all the edits and do everything really, really well. You put it all together so brilliantly. And I know that I'll come across very clearly in this. So, yes.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for telling your story. And it was lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's lovely to meet you as well.
So, as I leave Rachel and her husband and begin the journey back home, I know for a fact that things aren't exactly black and white as far as the paranormal is concerned, in the sense that you may never truly know what you're actually seeing or what you're actually hearing or who you're actually speaking to, especially in terms of Rachel's experiences. The warnings that she gives weren't exactly the ones I was expecting. I was expecting her to say, no, don't do it. Don't touch the Ouija board. Don't mess with it. Don't do this. Don't do that. But instead, she's very, very open to the fact that people are going to do what they want and when they want. And we have to understand that. It's their free will to experiment with things like these boards. But what she's saying is, be prepared. You know, seek advice and do everything you possibly can in your power to make your experience enjoyable, not necessarily terrifying. And I think that's very, very brave of Rachel to do that, especially after what happened to her. I think another thing that really surprised me about Rachel talking about these experiences throughout these interviews is at the start of the whole process, when I got to the house today, she even said to me, look, I'm not one of these incredibly emotional people. You're not going to get me sobbing and crying into my hands and, collapsing into, some sort of state of, mental panic. And that's not what I was after anyway, but it was nice for her to come out and say the truth, really. That's not really who I am. And that's not really what's going to happen here. But even just going through the process of this whole interview and looking into Rachel's eyes as she was answering the questions, there's a very, very strange intensity with Rachel's eyes. And I noticed this, that I think as the emotion built to certain points, and you can hear it in her voice at times, but as the emotion has built into the more sensitive parts of her experiences, her eyes gave off this strange glow. It sounds really weird, but they gave off a strange glow in a sense of, it was as if the contrast had been turned up, and her eyes would go from kind of a dark blue to a more intense blue. And I found that really, really strange. It was as if the eyes had taken over the emotion, and it was the eyes that were going to display that emotion as well. Whether that's a thing or not, I really don't know, but I really can't thank Rachel and her husband enough for doing this, for her to have recounted all of these experiences in such great detail and answering the questions which at first, when we first started to set this up, I don't think she was really wanting to answer, but she's been incredibly brave enough to answer. And I can't thank them both enough for that.